إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تبارك وتعالى لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين صدق الله العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد عدد ما ذكره الذاكرون وصل على سيدنا مولانا محمد عدد ما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون اللهم صل وسلم على عبدك ورسولك اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد أفضل صلواتك بعدد معلوماتك. In a hadith narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu anhu, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر كمثل الحي والميت أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the likeness of that person who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the one who doesn't is like the example of a dead person and a living person. So the one who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the one who's alive and well. And the one who doesn't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the one who's dead. Even though he has pulse, he has life, his heart is beating, he is breathing, his hands are moving, and there are all signs of life in that person. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the likeness of that person is like the dead person who doesn't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it is the remembrance of Allah that gives life to our heart. So the heart, spiritually and in reality, become alive when the dhikr of Allah permeates into the heart. When the dhikr of Allah is made by the heart. When Allah's dhikr is not made by a person, then he is like a dead person. And a dead person is he who doesn't make any sound, who doesn't make any movement, whose heart is not beating, whose tongue is not moving, who has no pulse, who has no life. So just like that, the person who doesn't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also like the dead person. So this example given by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a very important example for all of us. Because it makes us realize, it compels us to reflect on the importance of making dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you can remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in so many different ways. And one of the signs of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that you know when to answer the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 5 times in 24 hours, we are called by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to offer the prayer. So if we are not answering that call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during those 5 times in 24 hours, that means if at any time we did not answer that call, we became ghafil. We did not remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the prayer is all about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing else involved in the prayer. It's all about remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the benefits of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and keeping in mind the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is your heart remains alive. Your heart remains strong. And reciting the book of Allah, Quran, the tilawah of Quran, recitation of Quran, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam called it afdalul dhikr. This is the best form of remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to recite His words, to recite His speech. The entire Quran is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember, Quran did not come down to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in form of a written tablet, in form of a written book. Quran came down to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in a spoken word. Jibreel alayhi salam recited the verses of Quran, the ayat of Quran onto Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And thereafter, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam recited the ayat of Quran onto others, onto his Sahaba, the noble companions radiyallahu anhum. So the Quran is the best speech and the best way to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the beauties of Quran is that you don't only remember Allah by reciting the Quran, you also remember Allah by listening to the recitation of Quran. And in some ahadith, it is also mentioned that one who listens to the Quran, his reward is more than the one who recites the Quran. Because many times when you are listening to the Quran, there is more effect on your heart through listening to that recitation of Quran. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sometime he would ask one of his noble companions radiyallahu anhum to recite the Quran before him so he can listen to the recitation. Most of the time it was him reciting and everybody else listening. And listening to the recitation of Quran is so powerful, so effective, that so many Sahaba, so many companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they embraced Islam only by listening to the recitation. What did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He would recite the Quran, and those who would listen to it, Allah would guide their hearts. Allah would guide them just by listening to the recitation of Quran. They would not ask for the tafsir from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would not ask for an explanation and a commentary after listening to the recitation. The recitation alone was so powerful and so effective that their hearts would change. Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu, the second Khalifa of Islam, his story is well known and well written in so many ahadith, in so many books of ahadith. His heart changed only by listening to the recitation of Quran. And his heart changed at a time when he was an enemy of Islam. And his intention was to, na'udhu billah, kill Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. During that time, when he was heading towards the home of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with the intention to take the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, someone told him, why don't you just check on your sister and your brother-in-law? They have also embraced Islam. So if you kill Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what about your own sister? What about your own brother-in-law? Your own family has converted to Islam. Why don't you first check on them and then maybe go to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So he became furious, so angry and outraged that his own family has converted to Islam. So he went to the house of his sister Fatima radiallahu anha. And her husband was also there. And he went there and he started beating both of them. He beated his brother and he beated his own sister. Because he was still jahil. He was still in the day of jahiliyyah, in the time of ignorance. He had not seen the light of Islam. He had not seen the light of Quran. He was still in jahiliyyah. And in ignorance, this is what you do. You beat up your own sister. You beat up your own brother. You beat up your own children. This is what you do in ignorance. So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he did that. After beating them so much, when he cooled down, he said, okay, bring that book and recite some of that book to me. So his sister, she recited some ayat of Quran, and Umar radiallahu anhu, he melted. Literally, he melted. His heart melted. Just by listening to the ayat of Quran, just by listening to the words of Quran, his heart melted and everything changed. That Umar was not the Umar 2 minutes ago. That Umar that has just changed, he was not the Umar from yesterday. He completely changed. His mind changed. His heart changed. And he said, if this is the Quran, then I want to be the one who follows Quran and who reads Quran. And he went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not with that same ill intention anymore. He went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he accepted Islam. He became Muslim and he became one of the strongest men of Islam. And later he became the second Khalifa of Islam. The change came through listening to the recitation of Quran. Just by listening to the recitation of Quran, that recitation was so powerful and so effective that it changed the heart of Umar radiallahu anhu. And what is the lesson for us? Today, we see many people who have such bitterness towards Islam and towards Muslims. And I can assure you that the bitterness many people have today against Islam and against Muslims is far less than the bitterness that Abu Sufyan radiallahu anhu had during his jahiliyyah, or Umar radiallahu anhu had during that time, or so many others who converted to Islam. We see a long list of Sahaba who, before they embraced Islam, were the greatest enemies of Islam. They fought so many wars against Islam, against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at the example of Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu. He fought not one war, not two, so many wars against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then Allah guided him and he became one of the greatest defenders of Islam, one of the greatest supporters of Islam, one of the greatest men who spread Islam so far, who did so much for Islam. So, you should never think that this man will never change. You never know. The man who is the opponent of Islam today, he might become the greatest supporter of Islam tomorrow. It is Allah who changes the hearts. We don't have any time. We don't know when Allah will change the heart of this person. But we know Allah controls the hearts. So if today this person is opposing Islam so much and doing so much against Islam, We never know. Tomorrow, this person will do more, far more than this in support of Islam, in favor of Islam, in favor of Muslims. At least this is what we learn from our history. At least this is what we see in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in his struggle, in his effort, and in his mission. So never undermine the power of the Quran, the power of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you just present the translation of Quran to someone, and that translation itself does not carry the whole message, because Quran is the speech of Allah. When you translate that speech of Allah, and that is in Arabic, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke the words of Quran in Arabic, and it has so much meaning in each letter and each word. When you translate those words into any other language, the power and the effectiveness has already been reduced. It has already been reduced. So in order to combine the strength, in order to increase the strength of effectiveness, we should always couple that with the recitation of Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the effect of listening to the recitation of Quran. He said, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. The believers are those whose hearts are filled in awe when they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or when Allah is mentioned before them. When the dhikr of Allah is mentioned before them, their hearts become filled with awe. وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. And when the ayat of Quran, the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are recited upon them, their iman increases. زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Their iman increases. The power of their iman, the effectiveness of their iman increases. وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. And they put their trust in their Rabb, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us put ourselves and examine our own condition. What happens to our heart? What happens to our feelings when we listen to the recitation of Quran? Does our iman increase? Do we become more energized? And do we renew our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And do we renew our firmness to practice the teachings of Islam and spread the teachings of Islam? Because this is what is supposed to happen to our hearts when we listen to the recitation of Quran. If you understand it, it will happen. But even if you don't understand it, your iman still increases. Your iman bounces back. You still feel that level of emotion in your heart when you listen to the recitation of Quran. I'll relate to you a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which in fact is a revelation that was given to Yahya bin Zakaria alayhi salam, who was the son of Zakaria alayhi salam, and Yahya alayhi salam was also the cousin of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a message to Yahya alayhi salam. It was a commandment, and there were 5 commands in that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him to act according to those commands and tell others to do the same. So when he received the revelation, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when he received the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about these 5 commands, he delayed the delivery of those commands to other people slightly. At the same time, Isa alayhi salam was also informed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about these 5 commands. So Isa alayhi salatu wasalam came running to his cousin Yahya alayhi salam, and he said, Inna Allah amaraka bi khamsi kalimat an ta'amala bihinna wa ta'mura bani Israel an ya'malu bihinna. He said, I know Allah has ordered you to do 5 things and tell others to do those same 5 things. فَإِمَّا أَن تُخْبِرَهُمْ وَإِمَّا أَن أُخْبِرَهُم. He said, either you go tell them and don't do any delay anymore, or I will go and tell them. Because delaying the delivery of the order of Allah is not acceptable. It's not good for us. So Yahya alayhi salam, he said, Ya akhi, oh my brother, la taf'al, don't do this. فَإِنِّي أَخَافُ means don't go deliver my message to the people. This is something I am supposed to do. So don't you go and do it. Then he said, فَإِنِّي أَخَافُ إِن سَبَقْتَنِي بِهِنَّ أَن يُخْسَفَ بِي. I'm afraid that if you beat me, if you succeed me in delivering this message that Allah asked me to do, then I'm afraid of the punishment of Allah for me. I'm afraid that Allah might order the earth to swallow me. أو أن أعذب, or Allah will punish me. So then after that he gathered the children of Israel. He gathered Banu Israel who were there at that time in Bayt al-Maqdis in Masjid al-Aqsa. Hatta imtala al-Masjid, until the Masjid became full. So many people came, flocked to the Masjid to listen to Yahya alayhi salam and his commandments, his wahi. So then وَقَعَدُوا عَلَى الشُّرُفَاتِ. So people, since whole Masjid was full, as Yahya alayhi salam called all of them, people even were sitting on the edges of the Masjid. And then Yahya alayhi salam, he gave the khutbah. He said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَوْحَى إِلَيَّ بِخَمْسِ كَلِمَاتٍ أَنْ أَعْمَلَ بِهِنْ. Allah has revealed to me 5 words, 5 words that I must do. وَآمُرَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, and I must tell Bani Israel to do as well. أَنْ يَعْمَلُوا بِهِنَّ, that they must carry on. أُولَاهُنَّ أَنْ لَا تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا. The first one is that you must never associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You must stay away from shirk. The beauty of these five messages from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beauty of this revelation is that with each hukm, with each order, with each command, there's also an example given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said the first message is that you must never associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then comes the example. He said, فَإِنَّ مَثَلَ مَنْ أَشْرَكَ بِاللَّهِ كَمَثَلِ رَجُلٍ اشْتَرَى عَبْدًا مِنْ خَالِصِ مَالِهِ بِذَهَبٍ أَوْ وَرِقٍ ثُمَّ أَسْكَنَهُ دَارًا ثُمَّ قَالَ اعْمَلْ وَارْفَعْ إِلَيَّ فَجَعَلَ يَعْمَلُ وَيَرْفَعُ إِلَى غَيْرِ سَيِّدِهِ فَأَيُّكُمْ يَرْضَى أَنْ يَكُونَ عَبْدُهُ كَذَلِكَ. He explained this order, this command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, the example of this, like a person who purchased a slave, and he paid with his own money, with gold or silver, whatever price he paid for that slave. And then he gave a good house to his slave as well for living. And then he told his slave, go and do some work, and whatever you earn, bring it back to me, because your earnings are mine. So what does this slave do to his master? He makes money, he earns money, but whatever he earns, he gives it to another person. So the point in here is that Allah created all of us. Every human being is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result, it is Allah who's worthy of being worshipped. It is Allah who must be praised and who must be worshipped. No one else is worthy of worship. If the tree created you, or if the sun created you, or if the star created you, or if the earth created you, then you should worship the earth or the star or the tree. But if Allah created you, then you should only worship Allah. And since only Allah created all of us, therefore only Allah is worthy of being worshipped. Only Allah is worthy of being praised. No one else and nothing else is worthy of being worshipped. Therefore, shirk is considered the greatest sin of all. Because you are being ungrateful and unfaithful and disloyal to the one who created you, to your own creator, to your own master, to the one who gave you life, to the one who gave you this soul. So he said, Sayyidina Yahya alayhi salam, he said, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ خَلَقَكُمْ وَرَزَقَكُمْ. It is Allah who created you and who gave you this rizq, this sustenance and this provision. فَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا. So don't ever associate anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to practice on Sunnah Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Tonight, inshallah, we will have our monthly community gathering here at Masjid Islam. The time is 6:30, inshallah. We ask all of you to come to the masjid by 6:30. Our special guest will be Sheikh Abdul Hamid, inshallah. He is coming from Virginia, and he will be with us tonight. He will give a talk between 6:45 and 7:30, inshallah. So we ask all of you to join us and benefit from his talk. And after that, we will have dinner for everyone after Salatul Isha. Sheikh Abdul Hamid will be with us tomorrow as well. So there will be a short talk after Salatul Fajr tomorrow. And there will be another talk tomorrow after Salatul Isha. And Salatul Isha is at 7:30 p.m. He will be here on Sunday morning as well. So after Salatul Fajr on Sunday morning, he will give another short talk, inshallah. We ask all of you to try to attend these prayers, inshallah, so we can earn these multiplied rewards, and we can also benefit from his talk, inshallah. Also, I want to announce, inshallah, about the Ijtima', about the annual gathering in Worcester Masjid, Islamic Center of Worcester. This annual gathering will be during the weekend of December 21st. So it will start on December 21st and it will end on December 23rd, inshallah. This is the annual gathering, the Tablighi Ijtima' in Islamic Center of Worcester, inshallah. So it will start on December 21st and it will end on December 23rd, inshallah. Jazakumullah.